Alexander Graham Bell, 1847 to 1922, was a Scottish-born inventor, scientist, and teacher best known for inventing the telephone, a breakthrough that transformed global communication. Born in Edinburgh, Scotland, Bell grew up in a family deeply involved with speech and sound, which strongly influenced his lifelong interest in hearing and communication. Bell devoted much of his early career to teaching deaf and hard of hearing students, including work with visible speech, a system developed by his father to help people learn pronunciation. While experimenting with sound transmission and electrical signals, Bell successfully invented the telephone in 1876, famously making the first intelligible call. "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you." Beyond the telephone, Bell made significant contributions to science and technology. He worked on innovations such as a photophone, transmitting sound using light, metal detectors, improvements in aviation, and hydrofoil boats. He was also one of the founding members of the National Geographic Society and served as its president. Alexander Graham Bell is remembered not only as an inventor, but as a visionary who connected the world and advanced human communication, leaving a lasting impact on modern society.
It was the year 1876. The world was full of new machines and inventions. Trains and factories were changing life everywhere, but people still could not talk to each other from far away. If someone wanted to send a message, it took many days to reach. Then came a man with a big dream. He wanted to make sound travel through wires, so people could hear each other's voices even from miles away. In a small workshop, he worked day and night, and one day, his dream came true. He made the first telephone. That man was Alexander Graham Bell, the person who helped the world speak across distance and change the way humans communicate forever. Alexander Graham Bell was born on March 3, 1847, in Edinburgh, Scotland. His father, Alexander Melville Bell, was a teacher of speech. He taught people, especially those who could not hear well, how to speak clearly using a special system called visible speech. His mother, Eliza Grace Simmons Bell, was kind and musical, but she was almost completely deaf. From a young age, Alexander tried to communicate with his mother. He would speak slowly, close to her face so she could read his lips, and use small gestures to make her understand. Watching his mother struggle to hear filled him with compassion and sparked a lifelong curiosity about sound and hearing. At first, Alexander learned at home from his father. For a short time, he also attended a small private school in Edinburgh. Then, at the age of 11, he joined the Royal High School of Edinburgh, but he was not very interested in memorizing lessons. He loved music, experiments, and exploring how things worked. Even as a child, he showed great imagination. At 12, he built his first invention, a simple machine that removed husks from wheat faster than people could by hand. After about 4 years of schooling, he left at the age of 15, preferring to learn through his own experiments. He often said that science was like playing with ideas until they made sense. After leaving school, Alexander continued studying with his father. Together, they worked on visible speech, studying how the mouth, tongue, and voice create sound. In 1865, the Bell family moved from Edinburgh to London, England, after his father accepted a new teaching position, demonstrating visible speech. The move opened greater educational and scientific opportunities for Alexander. He studied briefly at the University of Edinburgh, then continued at University College London, 1868 to 1870, where he focused on anatomy, physiology, and the human voice. He did not complete a degree. His brothers Edward and Melville suffered from tuberculosis, and doctors warned that London's coal smoke air was worsening their illness. Following medical advice, the family decided to seek a cleaner climate overseas. By 1870, both brothers had died, and the grieving family emigrated to Canada, settling near Brantford, Ontario. There, among fresh fields and open skies, Alexander found peace and the inspiration that would one day connect the voices of the world. In 1870, after losing two brothers to tuberculosis, the Bell family sailed from London to Canada. They settled in a quiet town called Brantford in the province of Ontario, a place of open skies, clean air, and endless fields. For Alexander, it was a new world. He was 23, young, curious, and still mourning his brothers, but his mind was alive with ideas. He turned the barn behind their house into a workshop, filled with tuning forks, batteries, and pieces of wire. Here, he began the experiments that would change history. Every day he studied how sound travels through air. He struck tuning forks and watched how their vibrations could move light objects or stretch a wire. He drew diagrams showing how a sound wave might be turned into an electric signal and then back into sound again. Sometimes his experiments produced real sounds, humming musical tones that filled the air. Other times, the room was filled only with failure and silence. But Bell's curiosity never stopped. When he looked out over the quiet Canadian fields, he dreamed that one day voices could travel across distance. Not just messages in code, but real human speech. The thought of his deaf mother, and of all the people he dreamed of helping one day, gave him strength. Soon, opportunity knocked. In 1871, Bell was invited to the Boston School for the Deaf in the United States to teach his father's visible speech system. His classes were a success. He spoke gently, patiently, helping his students feel sounds by placing their hands on his throat as he talked. They could see his words in the movement of his lips and feel them in the vibration of his voice. To them, he was not just a teacher. He was a friend who believed that silence could be broken. While teaching in Boston, Bell's fascination with sound grew stronger. He began combining his lessons with electrical experiments, studying how current and vibration might carry the tones of the human voice. He spent long nights building strange instruments with magnets, diaphragms, and wires. In those moments, his classroom and his workshop became one. In 1873, he accepted a post as professor of vocal physiology at Boston University, where he taught how the human voice produces sound. His lectures inspired students and fellow inventors alike. That same year, he met a young, talented electrician named Thomas Watson, a man who shared his passion for discovery. Together, Bell and Watson began their work on the harmonic telegraph. The idea was to send multiple musical tones through a single wire, a way to improve the telegraph so it could carry many messages at once. But as they experimented, Bell noticed something even more remarkable. The same principles that carried musical notes could, perhaps, carry the complex waves of the human voice. By 1874, their small Boston workshop was alive with sound, humming wires, clicking reeds, and buzzing circuits. Some nights they worked until dawn, their faces lit only by the glow of a gas lamp. Neighbors thought they were madmen, chasing impossible dreams. But Bell kept repeating one line to Watson: "If I can make electricity speak, we can make the world hear each other." Their experiments began to succeed. By 1875, they could send distinct musical notes through a wire using electrical vibration. Bell realized he was on the edge of something historic, a new way for sound to travel, not through air, but through electricity itself. Standing in that dim Boston workshop, surrounded by coils of wire and the faint echo of tuning forks, Alexander Graham Bell felt it, the moment before discovery. He didn't yet know how close he was, but the world was about to hear its first voice through a wire. By early 1876, Alexander Graham Bell and his assistant Thomas Watson were working day and night in a small Boston workshop filled with tangled wires, magnets, and acid-stained batteries. Their earlier project, the harmonic telegraph, could already send several musical notes through one wire. But Bell's dream went further. He wanted to send the human voice itself. Bell's idea was simple but revolutionary. If sound could make a thin piece of metal vibrate, those vibrations could change an electric current, and that current could make another piece of metal vibrate in the same way somewhere else. If the vibrations matched, the sound could be recreated. It was science, but it felt like magic. However, Bell's progress was slow. The equipment often broke. At one point, the U.S. Patent Office nearly gave credit to another inventor, Elisha Gray, who had filed a similar design on the same day as Bell. But Bell's lawyer submitted the final papers just 2 hours earlier, and on March 7, 1876, Bell was officially granted U.S. Patent number 174,465 for an improvement in telegraphy. That patent would later be recognized as the telephone patent. 3 days later came the moment that changed history. It was March 10, 1876. Bell was in one room, Watson in another, testing a new transmitter. Suddenly, acid spilled from a battery onto Bell's clothes. Instinctively, he shouted, "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you." To Bell's amazement, Watson heard his voice clearly through the wire in the next room. He rushed in, shouting, "I heard you! I heard you!" It was the first time in human history that speech had traveled electrically from one place to another. A new age of communication had begun. In the following weeks, Bell and Watson repeated their experiment again and again, sometimes over longer distances, sometimes before small audiences. Every test filled Bell with disbelief and joy. The sound of a voice, once trapped by distance, could now cross space through metal and current. Later that same year, Bell demonstrated his telephone at the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia. Famous scientists and even Emperor Dom Pedro II of Brazil listened to his invention. When they heard a real voice come through the receiver, the audience was stunned into silence and then broke into applause. The telephone had officially been introduced to the world. Soon, Bell's device began to spread across America. Some people doubted it. Others called it a toy. But within a few years, it would connect homes, offices, and cities. For Bell, that day in March 1876 was not just the birth of an invention. It was the fulfillment of a dream born in his childhood, a dream to help voices be heard. After the first successful experiment in 1876, the world began to change, though few realized it yet. Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Watson kept improving their device, replacing crude parts with better transmitters and receivers. That same year, Bell gave public demonstrations in Boston, Salem, and New York, where people gasped as they heard distant voices travel through thin wires. In 1877, Bell and a group of investors founded the Bell Telephone Company. At first, even scientists doubted it could ever become practical. Western Union, then the telegraph giant, refused to buy Bell's patent for $100,000, a decision history would call one of its greatest mistakes. Within a few years, telephones began spreading across American cities. By 1880, more than 50,000 people were already talking through Bell's invention. Lines stretched from homes to offices, from factories to government buildings, shrinking distance like never before. For the first time in human history, a person's voice could cross miles in a heartbeat. But Bell himself was not interested in business. Once his invention was secure, he turned to science and teaching. In 1877, he married Mabel Gardner Hubbard, one of his former deaf students, a woman of remarkable intelligence and patience who supported his dreams completely. Together, they moved to a quiet home in Washington, D.C., and later to a beautiful retreat in Nova Scotia, Canada, called Bain-Bréag, meaning beautiful mountain. At Bain-Bréag, Bell filled his laboratory with experiments, not just in sound, but in flight, marine engineering, and genetics. He studied how kites could lift heavy loads, experimented with hydrofoils, and even worked on an early form of metal detector. His curiosity had no limits. Meanwhile, the telephone industry exploded. By 1886, over 150,000 telephones were in service across the United States. By 1900, there were more than 1 million. Bell's small invention had become the backbone of modern communication. Still, Bell remained humble. He once said, The great discoveries are not the product of one mind, but the result of many who build upon each other. In his later years, Bell founded the Volta Laboratory and the Volta Bureau in Washington, D.C., dedicated to research in hearing, speech, and helping the deaf, returning to the mission that had inspired him since childhood. When the first transcontinental telephone line opened in 1915, Bell, now an old man, spoke into a receiver in New York and called his faithful assistant in San Francisco. "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you," he joked, repeating the words of their first historic call, now heard 3,400 miles away. Watson replied, "It would take me a week this time." The crowd laughed and applauded. It was a moment of beautiful nostalgia. Alexander Graham Bell continued experimenting until his final days at Biography. He died peacefully on August 2, 1922, at the age of 75. During his funeral, every telephone in North America was silenced for 1 full minute in his honor. Across continents, lines went quiet. The world he had connected paused to remember the man who made it possible. When the world fell silent for 1 minute on August 4, 1922, it was more than a tribute. It was the pause between two eras. The age before Alexander Graham Bell and the age after. Because of him, the human voice was no longer bound by distance. A whisper could cross oceans. A cry for help could travel faster than a storm. And families separated by thousands of miles could still hear each other's love. In the decades that followed, Bell's simple idea grew into a global network. By the 1930s, telephones linked cities across continents. By the 1960s, satellites began carrying voices through space. By the 1990s, digital lines and cell towers turned his invention into something even greater, a world that could speak instantly. Today, every smartphone, every video call, and every digital voice still carries the spirit of that moment in 1876 when Bell cried out, "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you." He never sought fame or fortune. He sought connection, to bridge silence with sound, and to make the impossible possible. Bell once said, "What this power is, I cannot say. All I know is that it exists, and it becomes available only when a man is in that state of mind in which he knows exactly what he wants and is fully determined not to quit until he finds it." That determination changed humanity. From copper wires to fiber optics, from telegraph poles to smartphones, every call we make is part of the same story. The story of one man's dream to give voice to the world. Alexander Graham Bell, the man who turned sound into connection and connection into history. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with others who love history. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of leaders, legends, and the journeys that shaped our world.